An open dialogue has to maintain itself so that the entire political state can maneuver properly along that moving line. It's absolutely crucial. It's really, really, really useful to know that people vote their damn temperament. It gives you more of an understanding, at least in principle, of those who sit on the other side of you on the political fence. And there's been recent newspaper articles, quite interesting. I tweeted a couple of them about this company in UK called Cambridge Analytics, and they're using the damn Big Five. They can extract out Big Five information from your Facebook likes. They've got a model of every single person in the United States Big Five personality, and they help Trump craft political messages right down to the level of apartment buildings to appeal to people based on their Big Five temperament. And that's all recent work. And so one of the things that's very interesting is we are teaching computers to understand us so fast you can't believe it. And we really do risk walking into an electronic world where you will only see what you want to see. I mean, obviously the marketers are trying to do that as fast as possible, right? They only want to send you ads that you're going to be interested in because it's expensive and foolish to send you anything that will annoy you or that you'll ignore. And so the marketers are trying like mad to map who you are, even by watching your eyes. They're trying to figure out who you are so they can send you the right information, but the danger is that that'll happen, say, in the domain of news and broader information, increasing this tendency for people to be siloed in their exposure to the external world. It's sort of like each of us is becoming a micro-celebrity surrounded by electronic sycophants who do nothing but tell us exactly what we want to hear. It's a real problem. Karl Popper, a famous philosopher of science, said that one of the things that you should do, and this is akin to the Piagetian view, is you should always look for information that contradicts your current viewpoint. Now that's painful, right? Because who wants their axioms contradicted? It can take you apart. But it's the only way that you can ensure that you're learning at the same time that you're maintaining your stability. And that's another reason why it's really necessary to engage in dialogue with people that you do not agree with, because they're the ones who will tell you things that you don't know. It's of crucial importance in the maintenance of your own stability. The worst thing that can happen to a person, no, because there's many horrible things that can happen to a person, but one of the worst things that can happen is that you find yourself in a situation where no one is offering you corrective feedback anymore, because you rely on the corrective feedback provided by other people to keep yourself sane, to keep moving in the ever-changing environment. And if you cut yourself off from that feedback, then you end up static and shrinking. It's really not good. You get less and less competent, you get less and less confident, and the threats outside of you loom larger and larger. So that's all to do with the domain outside the light. See, Jung would also say that out in this domain that's sort of beyond what you understand, that's also where you encounter the archetypes of the collective unconscious. Now that's a really, really complicated idea. But what he means by that is that if you're put outside the domain of your competence, you're going to start to use fantasy to organize your world. So I can give you an example of that. So I presume most of you are old enough to have a conscious memory of when the Twin Towers came crashing down. And so everybody in the days after that was wandering around like they were in a daze. And the reason they were in a daze is because, well, it wasn't exactly clear what fell, right? There was the physical towers fell, but that was only a tiny bit of the problem, because those physical towers were embedded in a network of meaning, like a very, very sophisticated network of meaning, but also a political network and an economic network and a military network, and like they're nodes inside a very complex system. And so when they come crashing down, you don't know what's come crashing down, right? So you're out there in the unknown and wondering what's going on and wandering around in a daze, which is exactly what happened to people. And then what Bush did, George W., was immediately turn that into a good versus evil drama, instantly. And that's an archetypal idea. So that's when he came up with the idea of the axis of evil. I think that was Iran, North Korea, and I don't remember the other one at the moment. But he immediately turned the political landscape into a good versus evil drama. And he said to everyone in the world that they were either with him or against him, fundamentally. And that was part of the retreating into I guess a more protected landscape. That's one of the ways that human beings deal with the encounter with a traumatic threat. And so the reason you meet the unconscious and even the collective unconscious on the border of your knowledge is because when you hit the border of your knowledge, you start to use fantasy in order to bring the newest form of order out of the unknown so that you can start to make sense out of it. And that's what artists always do. That's what they do. And so from the Jungian perspective, people who are engaged in creative art are the ones who are on the perimeter of knowledge structures. And so what they're doing is taking the absolute unknown, which would be, in Rumsfeld's terms, the unknown unknowns, and turning them into partially known unknowns. That's what an artist does. And especially the more classical artists who deal with mythological and religious themes, which was the case for art right up until the late 20th century. They're using these mythological ideas to sort of extend the domain of human knowledge out beyond its current parameters. And so artists do that, and literary people do that, and dramatists do that, and they help us extend our knowledge. Now, that's where open people live. That's another way of thinking about it. So think about it this way. So you're in a city, and the city has parts of it that degenerate. And so you could think about that as order degenerating into chaos. And then the open people who are creative come along and they find places in the city that have degenerated but that still have interesting potential, right? And then they move in there where it's cheap too, and they start producing art. They start producing galleries, and then the coffee shops move in, and then the thing starts to get civilized. And then of course the more liberal conservative types move in. Those would be the yuppies, roughly speaking. So they're much more conservative than the artists, but they're still liberal compared to the bulk of the population. And so the more daring people move in after the artists have civilized it. And then after that, then the chain stores start to move in, and soon it's completely turned into Zellers or something like that. And then the artists have to go somewhere else and find another place on the boundary where they can live. And it's a physical boundary as much as a mental boundary. And so because you think each of those personality traits, there's 5 dimensions, each of them represent the possibility of inhabiting a kind of niche, right? An ecological niche. So if you're an extroverted person, your niche is the social environment. If you're an introverted person, the niche is, I think, nature. I don't know that for sure, because I've never figured out exactly what introverts are adapted to, but it's not exactly the social world. If you're agreeable, then your niche is relationships. If you're disagreeable, your niche is competition. If you're conscientious, your niche is duty and effort. And so, those niches are partly social because so much of our environment is social, but they're also partly natural because our social being is nested inside the natural world. And so you can think about the big 5 traits as different kinds of adaptations to different kinds of niches. And that's the niche that the open people, the open exploratory types occupy. So that seems to make a higher order super factor, extroversion and openness, called plasticity, as opposed to stability, which is conscientiousness, agreeableness, and emotional stability. And there's a playoff between those two things, because the stable people obviously are stable, but the plastic types of people are more dynamic, and they're more concerned with transformation. And in order to get a system optimally stable and dynamic, you have to have a continual interplay of those factors. Because static doesn't work because everything changes. That's the problem with conservatism. And the problem with liberalism fundamentally is, yes, everything changes, but you have to bring forward some structures from the past. So it's very, very difficult to get that balance correct. So, all right, so anyways, out there in the underworld, in the place beyond your current conceptualizations, that's the place of death and nature, and it's beyond the light, and it's also the place of hell, and that's what you see here.